Good afternoon everyone, and thank you for coming. I know today is a very unusual public holiday as part of our short 3-day lockdown. I want to thank everyone for their patience and understanding over the last 3 days. West Australians have once again demonstrated our goodwill and our commitment to eliminate the virus. I can confirm that WA has recorded no new cases of COVID-19 overnight. This is a fantastic result. It shows an immediate lockdown has delivered the results that we needed. The short 3-day lockdown has done the job it was designed to do. It was the circuit breaker we needed to limit community spread and keep our community healthy. Western Australians have listened to the advice and have gone out and got tested. Yesterday, 13,027 tests were conducted. That means since Friday, we have completed 29,963 tests, which is exactly what we needed. But it can't end there. So if you're unwell and have been, or you have been to one of the exposure locations, please go and get tested. We need those test numbers to remain high over coming days. In relation to close and casual contacts and their test results, I can provide the following update. Of the 354 current close contacts, 222 have returned a negative test result so far, with other results pending. Of those close contacts, 50 people were from the Kitchen Inn restaurant in Cardinia, and all 50 have returned negative test results. Currently, there are 748 casual contacts that have been identified, and 329 of those have returned a negative result so far. Yesterday, 259 people, adults and children, were tested at the Lansdale Early Learning and Childcare Centre. I can report that 212 have so far returned a negative result, with the remaining test results back soon. The testing that has been conducted has been exceptional. This has been necessary and so important in giving us a clearer picture of the kind of outbreak we were dealing with. So again, thank you to everyone that has been tested. Western Australians have done their bit to keep our community safe. It's a credit to each and every one of you. I wish we didn't have to go into lockdown, but it has been necessary and it's worked. This virus is so unpredictable. As I mentioned yesterday, it was too soon to predict when the lockdown would end. However, given the high number of tests and the results of close contacts in particular, I can detail the next steps. This morning, 2 separate emergency meetings have been held to finalise our way forward. These decisions have been based on the advice of the Chief Health Officer and the Police Commissioner. I can announce that at midnight tonight, the lockdown will end as planned. Interim restrictions will come into force from midnight tonight, allowing us to take a stepped down approach after the 3-day lockdown. We need to be cautious when we come out of lockdown, as the virus could still be out there. That's why a stepped approach is safe and the best way forward. We can't go back to where we were like last week just yet. This step down approach will give us confidence to begin to get back to normal while we wait for further testing and the incubation period of the virus to come to an end. The interim restrictions will be in place for the next 4 days. That is from 12:01 a.m. Tuesday, that's tonight, through to 12:01 a.m. on Saturday morning. As we receive more test results, we'll review the situation in a few days and then detail the plan for Saturday and onwards. I'll go through the new arrangements for Perth and Peel now. From tomorrow, people in the Perth and Peel regions will be free to leave their homes. Masks will remain mandatory, as they are now, both indoors and outdoors and on public transport. As they are now, masks are not required for primary school children. I'll say that again. As they are now, masks are not required for primary school children, for vigorous outdoor exercise, and for people who are exempt. The stay-at-home order will be revoked. However, for the next 4 days, people can return to work unless they can work from home or they are in a vulnerable category. All schools will resume. All students and staff at secondary schools will be required to wear a mask. Primary school students will not be required to wear a mask, but primary school staff will need to continue to wear a mask. Teaching staff at both primary and secondary schools are permitted to remove their masks whilst teaching. TAFE can open just like schools. Universities are open for online learning only. From tomorrow, there will be a 20-person limit in all homes and private indoor and outdoor gatherings. All public venues, including hospitality venues, entertainment venues and retail outlets, can reopen, except for the casino and nightclubs and indoor fitness venues. The 4 square metre capacity rule will be in place for this period only, with a limit of 20 patrons, not including staff. Just to be clear, like in the past, the workplace, schools and public transport are exempt from the 4 square metre rule. For hospitality venues like pubs, cafes and restaurants, it will be seated service only for the next 4 days. I know this makes it tough for many businesses. I understand and acknowledge that. But it's important we remain cautious and ease off restrictions in line with health advice so we can get back to normal as soon as possible. For the next 4 days, weddings and funerals can apply for an exemption to have 100 people, as they have during the lockdown period. Community sport and training can proceed with players and officials, but no spectators. Visits to hospital, aged care and disability care facilities are restricted to compassionate grounds only. In terms of travel, from midnight tonight, people can travel out of the Perth and Peel regions to other parts of WA. However, if you do, you must wear a mask. And if you currently are in another region and have been in Perth and Peel since the 17th of April, you will need to continue to wear a mask from tomorrow onwards. I'd encourage people to visit www.wa.gov.au to find out more information. Our team will be uploading information to the site as quickly as possible, so people should check in regularly to receive the latest information. I understand there will be a lot of questions and there will be some confusion. Coming out of lockdown is no easy task. It's about balancing things out and coming to a point that is in the best interest of the whole community based on the latest health advice. Over the next few days, as we get more people tested, we will be able to then outline the next plan beyond Friday. As we transition out of lockdown, you need to keep up the use of Safe WA. It needs to keep happening. I cannot stress that enough. Our health authorities need the information should they need to contact trace. We've seen how important contact tracing has been over the past few days. We mobilised contact tracers quickly to piece together people's whereabouts so we could warn people who may have been exposed to the virus. Safe WA is so pertinent in our new way of life so we can continue to enjoy the freedoms we have in WA. Please, this is a shared responsibility and everyone has a role to play to keep WA safe. I want to personally thank everyone who has done the right thing. This lockdown has been disruptive. I'm very sorry that it had to happen. I encourage everyone to keep supporting local businesses as much as they can, and as we transition out of lockdown, it's even more important. I also want to thank all West Australian business owners for their understanding. COVID has unexpectedly disrupted their businesses and their livelihoods. Before I hand over to the Health Minister, I just want to stress one more thing. That is, if you are unwell, if you have any symptoms, please go and get tested. If you have been to any of the exposure sites, go and get tested. Even if you have received a negative result, get tested again if symptoms developed. And remember, continue to practice physical distancing where possible, maintain good personal hygiene at all times, and use Safe WA. It has been tough, but I know WA has done it before. We have bounced back. West Australians are resilient, and we do what we do best. That is, we just get on with the job. This is why I'm so proud of the state in which we live. WA is still the best place in the country, and still one of the most fortunate and safest place in the world. Thanks very much. I'll hand over to the Health Minister.
Thank you, Premier. Just a few short remarks today. But can I begin by thanking everyone again for their support and patience during the last few days. The response from Western Australians has been phenomenal for more than a year now, and it's been terrific yet again during the current lockdown period. What you are doing as an individual is having a real impact on what we are doing as a community. The results over the weekend have been encouraging so far. Tens of thousands of tests and no positive results is what we all want to see. But of course, we remain cautious. Can I once again thank our contact tracing team? The fact that 354 close contacts of the 3 key cases have been identified, spoken to, tested and put in isolation is an impressive performance. As part of the next phase of restrictions, there will be some changes to elective surgery in metropolitan public hospitals. The focus will be on Category 1 and urgent Category 2 elective surgery for the next 4 days. Non-urgent Category 2s and all Category 3s will be rescheduled. All non-urgent outpatients and community health visits will be via telehealth where able or rescheduled. All impacted patients will be contacted. We request that people wait until you're contacted and do not ring the hospital unless it's an urgent inquiry. We understand the disruption this causes for everyone, but we hope it is only a temporary measure and we seek your understanding and patience. Just a quick update on the Safe WA app. There have been 662,484 scans yesterday. So that's about 3.4 million in the past 3 days. Let's keep it up. I think everyone has been reminded of just how important the Safe WA app is. The threat of COVID-19 is not going away. There's no room for complacency. So as we move into the next phase of restrictions, please continue to use the Safe WA app. Keep up the habit, keep using the app. It helps everyone to stay safe. Now I'll put you in the hands of the Police Commissioner.
Good afternoon. I'll just update you on a number of police-related matters associated with the lockdown. You'll be aware that this morning police had to make a decision in conjunction with Main Roads Department to close the Southwest Highway and the Forest Highway due to very strong smoke, haze and fog, which made traffic quite dangerous to drive through. That was closed between 9:30 and 10:45 a.m. this morning until the air clearance and driving conditions improved. During that period this morning, we had 4 minor crashes on the Forest Highway. There were some minor injuries and nothing of a serious nature. But look, I take the opportunity to reinforce to motorists, wherever they're travelling around Western Australia, to maintain safe driving distances and drive according to the conditions. It is the case that we, since early Saturday morning, police maintained the vehicle checkpoints. We stopped some 18,800 vehicles and some 616 were turned around because they didn't meet the conditions at the time there. I take the opportunity to once again say, please drive safely. Sadly, in the last 24 hours, 3 people have lost their lives on Western Australian roads. At about 2:37 p.m. yesterday, there was a 2-vehicle head-on collision on South Western Highway near Donnybrook. Both drivers, both women, sadly lost their lives, and a passenger from one of those vehicles has been transferred to Royal Perth Hospital in a serious but non-life-threatening condition. We had a further fatal crash this morning at about 6:10 a.m. at the Great Northern Highway, Booderee, which is up in the Pilbara near South Headland. In that case, the report is that a road train collided with a car, and the female driver driving that vehicle, the car, sadly is deceased. Police are conducting inquiries into both of these fatal crashes, and that investigation will take some time before we come to any conclusion. I also advise that there were 2 sea fatalities. One occurred on Saturday evening at about 6:30 p.m. We had report of a flare being fired from a vessel near the Dirk Hartog Island. A vessel with a man and woman on board had run aground. Another vessel nearby went to their assistance, but sadly the woman on board that vessel died at the scene. She's not been formally identified, and a man in the same vessel has very serious conditions. He's been airlifted from Denham and is presently being treated in Royal Perth Hospital. There was another matter in which a older man and a younger woman had their vessel submerged up on the mid-west coast, and sadly the man's body has been recovered from the sea. Once again, we're still on a long weekend. I urge people to take caution whether you're on the roads or whether you're recreating at sea or wherever. Please take care in what you're doing. I'm happy to take any questions on police-related matters before I pass to others.
Do you know if any of the vehicles that were turned around were turned away from the lockdown zone? Were people trying to get in, or were they...
I expect it's probably both. I don't have those precise details.
The confusion and the anger over letting people leave Perth and Peel to go down south, and then you issued the orders many hours later that they should quarantine. Is that a mistake?
No, look, we're dealing with a dynamic situation. We're in a state of emergency. We had 4 emergency management team meetings starting from about 8 a.m. on Friday morning. During that first meeting, that was the first time, in fact, during the meeting, we received notification of the man who travelled to Victoria. We had a subsequent advice during, in fact, a early afternoon meeting where we had advice of another infection. So this is an evolving situation. This is what West Australians and Australians have had to endure over the past 15 or 16 months. We have to adapt to the information in front of us. At the point in time where we had to make an urgent decision, late afternoon, the decision was to require people who had travelled from the Perth Peel area to wear masks. I had no public health advice at that stage to put further directions beyond the Perth Peel region. So therefore I did not sign any, and nor did I instruct state solicitors to do that. We did not know, and we can speculate now in hindsight, whether someone had flown to Broome or to Kalgoorlie, and people may well have asked, well, you've got someone that flew there. We had no information to make those sorts of judgments. I understand the people were frustrated, but it's not confined to South West. We're dealing with the entire state. So we have to act on the information in front of us at that time.
The man on the front page of the paper is a known COVID restriction denier. Was he penalised for his march?
No, the information I have is that the police made an assessment at the time. He was walking down St George's Terrace wearing, Respect Our Fallen Heroes or something of that ilk. They made a judgment call at the time to escort him off the road with compassion and sensitivity at the time. As to his background, none of that was known to the officers at the time. They just simply made a discretionary judgment call at the time, and no one was harmed.
It was reported that there was a guard of honour by police. Is that what happened?
Oh, look, I've only just read of a media report. I haven't received a detailed briefing on that. I do know I saw the photograph of police on bicycles escorting him off the road, but as to a guard of honour, I don't know.
Is it appropriate that he be hailed a hero if he's breaking the rules?
Look, there was a judgment call and some discretion made at the time.
What sort of delays are motorists expecting today coming back through those checkpoints?
So the instruction that I've given to police is to ensure that the road does not get too congested. Clearly, in what the Premier has just announced, the restrictions are being eased as of midnight. What we want to do, and what I've reinforced, is that we want all motorists to exercise safe driving according to the conditions, and the police will not be wanting to hold up people returning to the metropolitan area, or in fact returning to wherever they're leaving. We just want to exercise judgment again. I think, again, the community have been quite sensible about the way they've been able to drive about, aside from those fatalities, which is very sad. We just want people to exercise patience and caution.
Do you believe there should have been a more cautious approach adopted on Friday, and rather than saying to people you can go if you leave before midnight, whether it should have been, stay in Perth?
Look, I understand people's frustration. I'm not going to have police officers simply stopping vehicles without the appropriate legal and health advice. You could stop a whole, 20,000 vehicles if you like.
Of the market you look at, if you're looking at
Just Australia and global.
Are you able to answer best case scenario if we don't have any cases over the next 4 days, what that means?
So there's a couple of things that we have to consider here. One, what kind of cases we get over the next whether we have cases who are already in home quarantine, for example, or if we get cases that we are unable to link to the current outbreaks. Assuming if we got no cases over the next 4 days, then we'd also have to look at what whether we're likely to get any further cases going forward. So incubation period of this disease is up to 14 days. So generally we could get cases. So if the last time that the gentleman was in the community was on the 23rd of April, then we could get cases up to 14 days after that. So we will have to take that into consideration when we're making a decision about what the next steps are and whether there will be any continuing restrictions.
Can we get a couple of straight responses to will school camps be able to go ahead? Will Rottnest open? Have you made those decisions?
Rottnest is never closed.
Does that mean people
That was a decision made by, as far as we're aware, made by the...
Well, can I straighten up the answer there? Will people be allowed to go back to Rottnest?
Yes. Yeah, we... as of midnight tonight, we are removing any of the restrictions on the Perth and Peel area.
And why do unis have to go remotely? Why can't they take students?
Again, the rationale behind the restrictions over the next 4 days is around how we ensure that the numbers who are meeting together, the mixing that goes on, is restricted. Universities have large lecture halls, they have large tutorial rooms, so there is quite a lot of potential mixing there. So that's why the decision has been made. You'll note that it's restricted to 20 in all of the other venues. Obviously, it's a bit hard to do that. University is also very well set up to do online learning, and they've been doing it for a long period of time.
14 days after the last day of community transmission will take us to April 7. Is it likely that we'll be wearing masks until that day?
Again, we'll have to make a decision towards the end of this coming week, but it's certainly that may be a consideration, that may be an ongoing restriction that we would consider.
And other restrictions, are they likely to last until the end of that incubation period, April 7th? Some form of restriction?
I assume you mean May 7th. Look, I think, again, we will have to look at the situation, but it is like, and what restrictions we may want to consider going forward. But again, given the circumstances, it really does depend on whether we've had any further cases, whether we continue to have good results from our contact tracing and good results from our testing. And we obviously have to encourage people to keep doing that. We need people to get out there, get tested. That will give us the confidence then to make those decisions going forward.
How do you describe how would you kind of characterise case 986? He was sick, whereas the others were asymptomatic. Does that make it any more dangerous that he had symptoms?
No, it doesn't make it any more dangerous that he had symptoms. We know that both asymptomatic people and symptomatic people can spread. Some people are very effective at spreaders, the so-called super spreaders, others are not. So we don't know whether he has spread it, but certainly it's good to see that we have, all of the other people who were in that cafe are negative. So that would suggest at this stage that, for whatever reason he was susceptible and he's become infectious, but we haven't seen any cases related to him as yet.
So you wouldn't classify him as a super spreader at this point?
He's only just, he's been infectious for 3 or 4 days. There's no indication from our early testing that he's infected anyone. Certainly, his household members are negative, so that's always a good sign. But we won't know for another few days.
We're still waiting on the results for more than 100 close contacts to come back. That being the case, why are you really confident enough to take for another lockdown?
So some of those results are pending. They've been done and they're going through the systems. We get very rapid identification of any positive cases. So we're pretty confident there are no positive cases from any of the tests. But because the tests are being done by both public and private labs, reconciling them against our casual and close contacts does take some time. So while those are the official figures of 64%, we're very confident that a far greater percentage of those are negative. And certainly as soon as we get positives, we will, we let people know.
How concerned are you, considering thousands of people obviously travel down to the southwest, that there could be an outbreak that pops up down there? Has there been a lot of testing down in Bunbury? There has been quite a deal of testing in Bunbury. I haven't got the exact figures with me, but certainly Bunbury has done quite a bit of testing, and there's obviously, people are doing the right thing if they are feeling unwell or have been associated with any of those places. But we also, as part of contact tracing, we actually contact all of those close and casual contacts, and we have been tracking all of those. So anybody who may have gone to that area, and I'm not aware of anyone who's gone down to the southwest who's a close or casual contact, but if anybody had, we would have contacted them and required them to isolate until they, if they're a casual contact, until they're tested, or if they're a close contact for 14 days. So you're quite confident then that the southwest is safe?
Yes, to the degree we can, yes, we are confident that the southwest, that there's no issues in the southwest.
Just on the actual transmission of the virus from the Indian, the return traveller from India, when did he actually test positive initially? Do you know the date?
I'd need to check the dates.
And can you tell me why he wasn't moved, or sorry, why the surrounding guests weren't moved from that floor after he was tested positive? What are the protocols around that?
So the protocols now are where we have a case around, a positive case, we look at the positioning of other cases around, and we will now move people from around those rooms. We're not going to clear a floor or anything, or otherwise we wouldn't be able to accommodate the case, all of the people coming in. But certainly, once we identified more than a couple of cases, we have cleared the floor in that circumstance.
Is that a recent protocol, like after this case or after case 903?
It's been implemented over the, I'd have to check exactly when it came in, but certainly it's been implemented before this case.
Why didn't it occur this time round? Because across the corridor,
we've done it on a case by cases. We've been obviously looking at where there has been a number of higher risk groups. So if we've had a family, for example, with a number of people within that family, where there's a higher viral load, then we'd obviously move people from around that family.
So when we have people that test positive and they come from the high-risk countries like India, is it the case now that people around are moved?
We would look on a case-by-case basis. It really depends on the situation and where they're situated, what their thing. But certainly if we felt there was a risk, we would look at moving them.
But in this specific case, the traveller had come back from India, was staying at the Mercure Hotel, which had been identified as high risk, and had people staying in a room both directly next door and across the corridor. Why weren't those rooms cleared if the protocol was already in existence?
So the protocol was being implemented around that stage. So, it was obviously, but it was focused at the higher risk family. So where there was a a number of family members who had it where there's a higher viral load. We'd also introduced HEPA filters into those rooms to reduce that viral load, and we'd put other measures in the place, including moving our quarantine staff away from those rooms, ensuring that people wore masks when they opened the doors. All of those kind of measures were being put in place progressively through that time.
This seems like a bit of a stuff-up, right? I mean, 3 people they got the virus from this returned traveller. Should there not have been a more cautious approach adopted, given that it was a higher risk hotel?
So we put measures into place in all of our hotels. So it's not just about a higher risk hotel. There was a number of mitigation measures that have been placed into all of our hotels to manage exactly these kind of risks. But as I think has been said, quarantine hotels are not designed. These public hotels are not designed for quarantine. So we've had to put in measures to work with what hotels that are not sort of fit for purpose. And this has been an ongoing issue, and we've had to put in various measures to try and mitigate that effect.
You have a report on April 8th that said the Mercure was a high-risk hotel. Why didn't you order it cleared at that point?
So I saw a report on April the 8th which said that all of the hotels with mitigations, all of which we have now put in place, could continue to be used as quarantine hotels. That's what the report actually says. It doesn't say that they couldn't be used, it just says that we need to consider other mitigating factors. So it says all of the hotels could be used. So we continue to use it. Now, we already had people in those hotels. Our hotels are full. We have, last night, 2,100 people in our hotels. There isn't a spare hotel we can move people to. If I put them in home quarantine, we will have an outbreak. This is the bottom line. There is no easy solution. So we have to work through and transition them out, and we're in the process of doing that.
But it's been changed to a hotel for just low-risk seasonal workers.
Yes.
So can that be accommodated within the current hotel quarantine system? You're getting 1,000 people a week. Are enough of those low-risk seasonal workers that it's not going to further stress other parts of the quarantine system?
So the seasonal workers are a low-risk group. So these are the seasonal workers who've come from Vanuatu, from Fiji, from Tonga. None of those countries have had outbreaks in recent times. We know they're low risk, so we can actually use hotels. We still want to obviously have some arrangements in place for their health and their security, but we can use those hotels. So we can utilise one of those hotels, and that's what we will move to. Is as we retire hotels, we will look at identifying one for this particular cohort, and we've done that with the 4 points since February. We've been using that as for seasonal workers with no issues at all.
So are you suggesting that there were no other rooms for the other guests around that returned traveller to go into, to move them away?
We were able to move them to a degree, but we can't just close a hotel. I mean, the concept of...
I'm saying, in that instance, why weren't they moved away from that infected traveller?
Well, they were. They were once we identified we had an issue. It takes... so it does take a period of time for us to identify that that we had cases across the thing. That has to be done by whole genome sequencing, so that takes some time for us to identify that there was an issue and that was linked. So once we were aware that there had been a problem, you have to remember that in many of our hotels we've been getting high numbers of returned travellers who have disease. We've had aircraft with 7 or 8 people on them who have either picked it up at the airport during the flight. So we have to actually differentiate from those people. So we needed to identify that. So as soon as we identified that we had an issue, then we did obviously
move people from around them.
Premier, can we ask some questions?
Yeah.
Thank you. If hotel quarantine isn't fit for purpose and defence bases can't be used, then what is the short-term solution to the problems with hotel quarantine?
Well, I've got the Commonwealth to agree now to halving the number of people that we quarantine, so that will go down to 512 from the coming Thursday. So that will mean a reduction in returning people to Australia as of Thursday. That will help us to manage the load of people. But I think, as I think I said yesterday, we'll have to recalibrate how many people we can take. I think it will be a reduction, probably quite significant, on the 1,025 because we can't have these sorts of things occur again. Hotels were not built for this purpose. Obviously, we've done everything we can to try and mitigate and manage these things. We've had 2 incidents now. We need to recalibrate how many people we can take.
The WA government is sitting on a big surplus. I know you say it's a Commonwealth responsibility, but why won't the WA government build a fit for purpose facility?
Well, that would take a very long period of time, and you may still have issues occur. Melbourne, just so you know, because COVID's gone on for 14 months, a lot of things have happened. But Melbourne had issues with hotel quarantine. So what they did was they closed the whole system down. They took a bunch of hotels, they stripped them out, they redid the ventilation systems, they took out all the carpets, all the furnitures, they put in lino. They did all those sorts of things. They recommissioned, they put returning Australians in, and they had spread from room to room. So there is no perfect system. There is no perfect system. But what we need to do is make sure we have more manageable numbers. We also need to do is make sure that Australians or people living in Australia can only go overseas for the most extreme and extraordinary of reasons. We can't have people leaving this country for whatever purpose and then coming back COVID positive, one, displacing other Australians overseas, but 2, putting pressure on our system. So there's a range of things can be done, but I think the most important is we need to have a system that has fewer people coming into hotel quarantine, and we have to have fewer people leaving Australia and returning.
Berejiklian again claimed today that New South Wales is doing the heavy lifting with all the people coming back. But she also pointed out that in the early stages, the state governments, the premiers and the Commonwealth agreed that the states would take care of hotel quarantine and it would be their responsibility. Now you're trying to back out of that agreement.
I didn't see what she had to say, but obviously at the height of what was occurring last year, you might recall how difficult it was and how we had to move very quickly in March of last year. That's what, 13, 14 months ago, that we put in place arrangements. But that's 13 or 14 months ago. Since then, we've learnt a lot. And we now know that our hotels were not built for or designed for this purpose. The Commonwealth does have facilities that were built for these sorts of reasons. Now, I know the Commonwealth doesn't want to do it, and I've heard all the arguments, but basically they don't want to do it because it's risk. It's risk for them. And look, I understand that argument. I think they should be honest about it. It's risk for them. But if they're not prepared to do it, we'll just have to drop the number of returning people into Australia. And that will be sad for many families, but we can't go through these sorts of events. So we'll drop the number. We have to do that. And I just urge the Commonwealth to stop letting people leave this country to go to weddings or other things overseas. People are going overseas. Just so you know, I've had multiple occasions this reported to me. People have been going overseas to plan sporting events. They've been leaving here to go and study. They've been going to funerals and they've been going to weddings. Now, they're not essential. You can study here, you can get married here. People here are missing funerals. They're not essential. And we need to stop this sort of international travel for these sorts of purposes.
Premier, just to confirm there, you're saying that people attending the funeral, there are a lot of dual citizens in this country. Not everyone's life is fully in Australia in terms of family and their personal life. You're comfortable saying that for many of those dual citizens who've spent the last 12 months fearing that something might happen to a loved one overseas, that they don't have a right to be able to apply and to be legally granted that exemption to go to that funeral. Are you comfortable with that rhetoric that you're saying there?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. We're in a pandemic. Millions of people are dying. If you can't go to a funeral or you can't go to a wedding or you can't go and run an athletics meet, so be it.
Well,
So be it.
Premier, at the start of the pandemic, Australians were told that lockdowns were necessary to make sure that the health systems were prepared to handle outbreaks. Why don't you trust your contact tracers to deal with a very small number of cases?
Well, we do, and they're doing a terrific job.
Then why did you lock down 2 million people over a very small number of cases? Are you afraid that the hospital system here won't be able to cope?
Because I don't want to see what happened in America or Britain or India or Brazil happen here. I think that's, if I can finish what I'm saying, I think it's, I think people watch on the news every single night what's occurring in other countries around the world, and they know we don't want that to happen here. There's 2 places in the world, countries of significant size, that have avoided that, and that's New Zealand and Australia. And that's basically because we've used our isolation, our borders, and our measures are using our public health initiatives to good effect. And I want that to continue.
So one case equals a lockdown, Premier? One case equals a lockdown regardless of your contact tracer's ability to get on top of it?
We had 3 cases, just so you know. We had 3 cases over the...
Case tomorrow. Will be locked down?
I'll let you speak.
To try to give people some certainty, you talk about us being in a step-down phase. If we get another case tomorrow, are we then back in the step-up phase and we're going to lockdown?
It all depends what occurs. Obviously, we have huge amounts of testing going on, and we've got to just be very cautious and very precautionary. So if we get another case tomorrow, for instance, and it's a person who is quarantining, we know that went into quarantine before such time as they potentially became infectious. Well, that's a different matter to someone who's out in the community and it's a mysterious case and we don't know where they got it. So it all depends on circumstances, and that's what we've learnt over the last 14 months. It all depends on circumstances.
Where do we go moving forward?
I'm sorry, Josh.
What do you view as a manageable number of returns?
We're going to work that out. We're halving it down to 512 from Thursday, but we're going to work out what is a manageable number. So that will take a little bit of time. Obviously, we need a bit more scope within our hotels to move people around. Having very full hotels makes that difficult. So we will work out what is manageable within the system as safely as possible. But obviously, we did as much as we could to bring Australians and others back to Australia. So we've had about 45,000. As I said the other day, you know, that's 1.5 times the size of Kalgoorlie come through our hotel quarantine system. We've done a lot to bring returning Australians home. And as we now know, many of those people returning are people who went overseas recently for whatever reason. So we're going to recalibrate, we're going to look at what's possible, but we're going to be very firm about it. So I know the Commonwealth just wants us to take up the slack. I know they want us to do all the work, but we're going to make sure we do it in a safe way.
How do you stop the dumping in here, though? I mean, the caps are set by negotiation. How do you then stop in the future, 6 months' time, the Fed's just dumping another 1,000 people here, you know, every week?
Well, if we can't handle people safely, they can't do that. They can't do that. Well, they just can't.
You're saying, okay, I'm only going to take 500. And we've got to recalibrate, and you're giving no indication that we'll raise that number at any time. So the Feds then turn around and say, well, here's 1,000 this week, deal.
Yeah, well, they can't do that. They can't do that. Jeff, they can't do that. If they want to do that, then they're risking the health of Australians. They shouldn't do that, and I'm pretty sure they won't. Well, they're not. Section 51, subsection 9 of the Commonwealth Constitution, quarantine, Commonwealth responsibility. They're not doing it. So we have taken up the load. We have taken up the slack. And we're going to do it as safely as we can, return Australians as safely as we can. We're not going to do things that cause these sorts of problems in the future.
In February that ventilation issues in the hotels would be fixed by the end of March, and that WA was willing to step back up to over 1,000 a week from that point. So doesn't that undermine your criticism of the Commonwealth and your approach to fixing the ventilation problem?
No, we've put in place a whole range of mitigations, so I'll take you through them. We've ensured that people who work in hotel quarantine get daily testing. We put in place HEPA filters, which are filters that filtrate the air in any rooms where people are COVID positive. We're putting in place enforced quarantine for anyone who works in hotel quarantine. a whole range of other analyses of the systems and the like, ventilation reports and the like. The ventilation studies themselves are very complex. They're actually apparently, engineering studies of extraordinary dimension to try and work out airflows within hotels, and they're all imperfect because where air goes inside a building is an imperfect science. So all of these things, plus a whole range of others, we put in place to try and mitigate the risk. But just making the point that we'll do what we have to do to keep our state safe and make sure the hotel quarantine system is as safe as possible. It'd just be great if the Commonwealth, which has responsibility under the Commonwealth Constitution, would assist.
So, Premier, do you accept any responsibility for what caused this lockdown?
I accept responsibility for everything. I accept responsibility for everything within Western Australia. So if I can finish my words. So I accept responsibility. We'll do our best to make sure we keep it safe into the future, and that will result in a reduction in the number of Australians returning, because we can't have these things occur again.
Greg today
has described Australia's hotel quarantine system as the best in the world. Is it?
I think it's had a number of issues, but they have been very small in number, considering the number of Australians returning. But the problem is when you do have an issue, you then have what's happened over the last 3 days. So the consequences can be quite big when you have an issue. So the system itself has actually resulted in very few cases, both here and in other states. But when you have a case and it breaks out into the community, you then have pretty extraordinary consequences as a result. And the thing about Australia is, and I think this is right, we don't accept, unlike Britain or unlike other countries around the world, large numbers of cases. So it's not as though we say here in Western Australia and Australia, it's okay to have a few mistakes. We want to have it's okay to have a few problems. We want to make sure we have a very, very effective and safe system, so we don't get the consequences that they're having in Britain or France or Brazil or India or America or wherever else around the world.
So moving forward, if we are not willing, if the Commonwealth's not willing to use its facilities and the states aren't willing to build purpose-fit facilities, are we relying on vaccines to open up to the rest of the world?
Well, vaccines will help significantly. I don't see how we can open up to the rest of the world until we get the vast majority, overwhelming majority of Australians vaccinated. Until such point in time, it will be very difficult. And then you'll have to judge which countries you can open up to. Are they heavily vaccinated or are they not? We don't actually fully know whether if you're vaccinated, whether you are then able to transmit or whether you're then still vulnerable. So there's a whole range of imponderables in there, but that will have to be worked out over the course of the coming year.
But there's no light at the end of the tunnel if we're not building purpose-fit facilities that can withstand this pandemic years to come, if it's still going.
Well, okay, so I don't get the logic of that. If you built a purpose-fit facility as you described it, that then doesn't allow you to open borders, because everyone who comes back then has to quarantine for 2 weeks in that facility. So let's imagine we open the borders and 500,000 West Australians went to Bali as they do each year. How big would the quarantine facility have to be? It'd have to be massive. It'd have to be the size of a city to cope with that. So quarantine facilities are not going to allow for international borders to be opened. What's going to help us in that ambition, and like everyone else, eventually I want to see international borders open. I just want to see it done in a safe way where we know when we open that we're not going to put people's lives at risk in Australia, as we see is occurring around the world.
So you after a total shutdown of overseas returners from India, has that been broached?
I raised with the Prime Minister Thursday a week ago a suspension while we deal with this issue. Oh, well, a suspension. And I note the Commonwealth at the last National Cabinet meeting wound back. But also we need to make sure people going overseas are not going to countries that are full of COVID without having an extremely, extremely good reason.
Would you like though to see, like, take your 500, which is the new cap, they just come from Europe or America or whatever, but they don't come from India?
Well, I think there's countries around the world, it might be Brazil, there might be other countries that have big issues where we need to look at it. Half, or perhaps even now more than half, of the returning COVID positive people are coming through or out of India, and that's a big problem because that's caused the problem that we face. So we need to judge these things on their merits based upon the COVID status of the country in question. And at this point in time, it's obviously India. At other points in time, it may well be other countries.
Would you use the second example this year where...
Sorry, Josh?
Would you accept quarantine hotels being used for purposes like international students or skilled migrants? Or is that too big a risk?
Certainly not at this point. Not at this point. We don't need to take that risk. Just so you know, I mean, Western Australia, we had 4.8% unemployment rate the other day. We have the strongest economy of anywhere in the world. We have the best set of finances of anywhere in the world. Our economy is doing extraordinarily well. What will wreck that is if we bring in cases and they spread around the community. So not only would it wreck the health of the state, it would also wreck the economy of the state.
Do you believe with a second example this year where you've had a situation like this and contact tracers have got to work and pulled in everyone within the incubation period, does it not give you comfort that we can handle this sort of situation again in the future without the need for a full lockdown like this?
Well, contact tracing is an important tool. We've had a lockdown for 3 days, and we're coming out of it with a range of measures that are sensible and effective and proportionate. So you put everything together. You don't just do one single thing. You do a whole range of things. And that's what our systems, that's what our teams are doing.
Do you believe that the Mercure cluster was completely unavoidable?
I'm sorry?
Do you believe that the Mercure cluster was completely unavoidable, given that, you know, being told that mitigation measures were put in place? Was this completely unavoidable?
Well, our system is not without risk. Every state's gone through it. And it doesn't matter what you do, there is still risk. And so as long as we have returning Australians, as long as COVID's in the world, there will be risk. There's no avoiding that.
You've said that you're very
But as you know, it's about diminishing the risk. It's about reducing the risk. And obviously what we want to do is reduce the risk as much as possible.
The government has the ability to build temporary facilities where we saw all the sleep of isolations, and given the fact that repeatedly the hospital is budget for it, and there's an argy-bargy rolling through the federal government, whether the central government says that the federal facilities are not capable of doing.
Well, there are already facilities. Curtin Air Base, for instance, near Derby, is not an operational air base. I've heard all the arguments that it's an operation, all these operational facilities. It's actually not. It's a bare airstrip, but it has a large facility attached to it that has upwards of 1,500 beds. So these facilities are out there that aren't actually crucial to the defence of the nation at this point in time. Obviously, if we're in wartime or if we're in a situation that was, enhanced in a sort of operational environment or operational sense, well, then you might not use those facilities, but we're not. So those facilities are sitting there. They're available. It's just the Commonwealth doesn't want to use them.
Premier, you've said you're very sorry that this lockdown had to happen. How long do you think people will keep supporting this tactic, and do you worry that it will lose effectiveness over time?
Well, we just take health advice on what is the appropriate course, and obviously we're very cautious. Very cautious. We're not a government like other countries around the world that just seem to say, let it rip. Don't worry about it. We'll just manage it as best we can and give in to the biggest protesters. We don't do that. Can I finish what I'm saying? We don't do that. So I've seen examples around the world of heads of state and the like that are out there sort of addressing big rallies without people wearing masks and just saying, we'll just put up with this. Well, that's just a recipe for people dying in large numbers, particularly older people and people with disabilities. And we don't want to see that happen. So we have a far more cautious, far more precautionary approach both here, as does New Zealand, and it's worked. Just so you all know, our approach as a country has worked as well as anywhere in the world. And what you find is that anyone who has relatives in Britain or South Africa or the United States or India or wherever it may be, they say, their relatives in those countries say, what did Australia do? How did Western Australia manage it? How come you've done so well as a society? That's because we're cautious and precautionary. And I know the arguments. I've been through this for 14 months. The arguments going on and on and on, how somehow we should adopt the model of one of these other countries. Well, if we did, we'd have tens of thousands of people dying. That's the fact. So we haven't adopted those models. We've adopted a very cautious and precautionary approach. As far as I'm concerned, whilst I'm a Premier, that will continue.
And Premier, what if people don't support you in that though? That's proved popular for you. You won a landslide election last month. If suddenly people's tune changes, will you change your tact?
We'll follow health advice. No, I'm just telling you right now. Whilst I'm the Premier, we'll follow health advice and we'll be cautious, and that will continue.
On the front page of the paper today.
I'm sorry, Jackie?
On the front page of the paper today, this man was labelled a hero. He was also told of COVID, to get rid of COVID by gargling betadine, and he also ran for the no mandatory vaccination party. Should he be labelled a hero?
I'm not going to get into editorial decisions, but if those are the things that he is saying, obviously I don't agree with them.
There are two Australian cricketers who went to India to play on the IPL. They now want to come back home. Given your views on people leaving Australia wanting to come back, cricket's not essential, is it? Should they go to the back of the queue, or should they not be allowed back in? How do you think they should be?
I don't manage the queue. I don't manage the queue. That's managed by airlines. It's managed by the Commonwealth Government. That's a matter for them as to how the queue is managed. But all I'd say is going to India to play cricket at this point in time is not essential. It is not essential. And what also happens is, you know, the people who do that, even if they are COVID-free, they get on aircraft that often have COVID-positive people on them. It's just not essential. It's not necessary. And whilst we have low rates of vaccination, whilst the virus is rampant throughout the world, in particular in some countries, we shouldn't be sending people over there. Thank you. Not Channel 7. I thought that would be a Channel 7 question.
How many people can attend the Western Derby on Sunday?
We'll make that decision during the course of this week. Obviously, we have emergency meetings, in fact, multiples each and every day, and we'll be able to hopefully provide some advice by the back end of this week. Sorry, by the back end of the working week.